In Oakland, California, in 2023, the average wait time to reach a 911 dispatcher was over 4 minutes. 4 minutes. In a cardiac arrest, brain damage begins in 4 to 6 minutes. In a structure fire, a room can reach flashover in 3. In Oakland, the phone was still ringing. This is America's 911 crisis. And it is not limited to one city. Across the United States, 911 dispatch centers are operating with vacancy rates that would shut down any other critical public safety function. The International Academies of Emergency Dispatch estimates that American PSAPs, public safety answering points, are collectively short 30 to 50% of their required staffing. 1 in 3 dispatcher positions is unfilled. In some centers, the vacancy rate exceeds 60%. The people who answer when America calls 911 are running out. To understand how this happened, you have to understand what the job actually is. A 911 dispatcher is not an administrative role. It is a high-stakes, high-volume, and continuous decision-making position, operating under conditions that produce documented rates of post-traumatic stress, comparable to combat veterans and emergency room nurses. A dispatcher on an 8 or 12-hour shift may handle between 100 and 200 calls. Some of those calls are routine. Many are not. A dispatcher who has guided a parent through CPR on a child, who stayed on the line when the call went silent, returns to the console for the next call without transition, without debrief, without time. The next call is already in queue. For decades, this role has been classified by most state governments as an administrative or clerical position, not a first responder. The classification affects everything: pay scales, retirement benefits, mental health support eligibility, legal protections, workers' compensation for occupational trauma. In most states, a 911 dispatcher who develops post-traumatic stress disorder from years of managing life and death calls is not eligible for the same occupational mental health protections as a police officer or firefighter who responds to the same incidents. And they made the calls. They activated the response. They are not first responders. The pay reflects this. The national median salary for a 911 dispatcher in the United States is approximately $46,000 per year. In high-cost-of-living cities, the same cities where dispatch centers are most critically understaffed, that salary does not support a stable life. Entry-level retail positions in those same cities often pay comparable wages, with no mandatory overtime, no rotating shift work, no traumatic call exposure, and no legal liability for response decisions. The recruiting math does not work. The training pipeline compounds the problem. A new 911 dispatcher requires between 6 months and 2 years of training and supervised on-the-job experience before they are fully independent. Priority Dispatch Certification, CAD System Proficiency, Radio Protocol Competency, Multi-Agency Coordination, Crisis Intervention Technique. The position cannot be filled by posting a job listing on Monday and having someone answer calls on Friday. And every dispatcher who leaves takes 6 months to 2 years of replacement capacity with them, and they are leaving at accelerating rates. Burnout is the primary driver. When a center is understaffed, the remaining dispatchers absorb the missing workload. Mandatory overtime becomes standard. 12-hour shifts extend to 16. Days off are canceled. Vacation requests are denied. The dispatchers who remain are doing the work of 2 positions, while managing the psychological weight of a job that already produces high rates of secondary trauma. They burn out faster. They leave. The vacancy rate increases. The cycle accelerates. The system consumes itself. The consequences are measurable. In Oakland, A 2023 city audit found that the dispatch center was answering only 56% of 911 calls within the national standard of 15 seconds. The center had a vacancy rate exceeding 40%. Callers were waiting on hold. Some calls went unanswered. Oakland is not an outlier. How similar reports have emerged from Louisville, Kentucky, Memphis, Tennessee, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Detroit, Michigan, and dozens of smaller jurisdictions where the staffing crisis is equally severe but less visible. The federal government has begun to respond. In 2022, Congress passed the Improving Mental Health and Wellness for 911 Act, allocating funding for dispatcher mental health support programs. In 2023, legislation was introduced, though not yet fully enacted, to reclassify 911 dispatchers as first responders at the federal level. 17 states have passed their own first responder reclassification laws. 33 have not. Some cities have moved aggressively on compensation. In 2023, several major metropolitan dispatch centers increased starting salaries to between $60,000 and $80,000 in direct response to recruitment failures. Early data suggests these increases reduce vacancy rates, but the pipeline problem remains. Raising the salary does not immediately produce trained, certified dispatchers. It produces applicants who will be ready in 12 to 18 months. The centers are short today. Technology is being explored as a partial solution. AI-assisted call routing, automated text-to-dispatch systems, and machine learning tools that classify incoming calls and suggest resource assignments all are in active development or limited deployment across American PSAPs. None of them replace a trained dispatcher. On the pre-arrival instruction, the dispatcher walking a caller through CPR, cannot be automated in a way that matches the judgment, adaptability, and human reassurance of a trained professional on the line. Technology can assist. It cannot substitute. The reclassification movement represents the most significant structural response to the crisis. First responder status changes the calculus of the job. It produces access to occupational mental health programs designed for traumatic stress exposure. Enhanced retirement benefits that recognize the long-term health consequences of the role. Or workers' compensation coverage for PTSD as an occupational injury. And, perhaps most critically, a change in how the role is perceived and recruited. The classification signals what the job is. When it signals correctly, it attracts people who understand what they are signing up for, and who are more likely to stay. The 911 dispatcher is the first link in the emergency response chain. Before the ambulance moves, before the fire truck rolls, before the police officer is dispatched. The chain cannot move without that first link. And right now, across hundreds of American cities, that link is dangerously thin. In Oakland, after the 2023 audit, the city launched an emergency recruitment campaign, raised dispatcher starting pay by 30%, added mental health support resources, and implemented mandatory overtime limits to reduce burnout-driven attrition. By late 2024, the vacancy rate had dropped from 40% to 22%. Answer times improved. The phone stopped ringing quite so long. The work is not finished. But the system, when it chooses to act, can change. If you want to understand how American emergency infrastructure works, and why the systems that keep millions of people safe are more fragile than most people realize, consider subscribing to Health Systems USA. And tell us in the comments, have you ever waited too long for 911 to answer? Did you know this crisis existed?